Eiyuden Chronicle Rising is out day and date on Xbox Game Pass. It's an odd one, as it is the action RPG spin-off prequel to a game that is coming out in a year. You will eventually take 3 characters from quite different backgrounds and hack and slash your way through the same environments over and over and over again. Retailing at only $14.99, I was shocked at just how incredibly long this game is, especially considering its stunning lack of variation in both gameplay and locations. Yet I somehow grew to rather enjoy my time with it. It's damned pretty, the writing is great at times, and there is heart here. Is that all enough to make this one worth your time? Well, let's find out in this old XboxEra review of Eiyuden Chronicle Rising. The game had a successful Kickstarter campaign, which led to 2 titles. This is Rising, which sets up multiple companion characters you'll meet in the full RPG. This is a side-scrolling action-adventure on a budget. The first thing you'll notice is it's damn pretty. There's a pixel aesthetic which is used on the character and enemy models, but most of the game is fully rendered, which allows for the lighting system to tie it all together beautifully. It's not 2.5D so much as in you never shift perspective, but the developers smartly use multiple layers in the fore and background to give things that really good feeling of depth. Your main character is CJ, a 16-year-old rugged adventurer looking to complete her village's rite of passage. To do this, she visits a town that's recently discovered after a massive earthquake that there is a treasure-filled set of barrows beneath it. The scope of things is smaller than in the average story, and I appreciated it. Though it did mean the location variety ended up being surprisingly small for a game purported to be 25 hours long in pre-release coverage. Early on, the focus is on appeasing the city's mayor, so that your would-be adventurer can head down into the barrows while looking to find a treasure worthy enough for her right. This leads to one of the game's main mechanics, the stamp card. And I cannot sugarcoat it, these stamps it tracks are almost all really boring fetch quests that send you back and forth through the game's few areas dozens of times, and there are 160 of them in total. These quests aren't really optional either, as they often tie directly into building the town back up, which in turn is how you unlock every single upgrade path in the game. Thankfully, the story itself is well written. It's occasionally really funny, and kept me interested throughout my entire time playing. It does feel like a setup for the next game, which is to be expected, but the translated text is of an extremely high quality, and I grew to like all of the main characters over time. Another area that did take far too long to get interesting, and then overstayed its welcome though, was the combat. For the first few hours, you'll attack by pressing X twice, waiting for the internal cooldown to finish, then you press X 2 more times again. For the next 4 or 5 hours, you'll then get to mix in the Y button as your second party member finally becomes available to you. A few hours after that, you finally gain access to the B buttons and things finally become almost mediocre. Combat in the game takes way too long to get to what I would expect as a standard beginning system, and is just another case of this smaller budget title pushing itself too far. Having a basic combo of 2 swings for that long felt terrible and had me contemplating not doing this review at all. Once CJ was finally joined by Guru, the second party member, and I was able to mix in another button, as attacks will also change your character as you swing with them, it added a little bit of spice and unlocked the only interesting part of the game's combat. Oh yeah, and finally when the third character joined, the system became somewhat decent, but it took so long to finally get her. And that interesting part of the combat is a slowdown tag-in system that operates on a rather short cooldown. Starting up a combo with one character, Then switching to another by pressing their attack button allows you to chain attacks together in a very cool looking and extremely powerful way. All of those shops you help set up in town sell you upgrades for your weapons and your armor, which can add in things like a double jump for CJ, a power jump for Guru, and a float ability for Isha. Near the end of my time with the game, I felt like I finally had enough abilities to deal with the game's enemy in an almost satisfying manner, but it never really felt good. Everything's just too deliberate. Movement is always stilted feeling, and you can be locked into a corner far too easily by certain enemies. I didn't hate the game's combat and traversal, but it's definitely not in the upper echelon of the genre, as after a few hours of constantly doing those slow motion tag-in moves, even they became rote and just frankly boring. The game does offer up a normal mode, which is what I've been describing, and a basic mode, which essentially turns it into Balan Wonderland, where one button is all you need and the game does the rest for you. It would be good for kids, I guess, but with how unbelievably slow the dialogue is and how repetitive the quests are, I can't imagine most kids sticking with this game, no matter how pretty it is. Alright, enough negative things. The writing in the game is really good, but the pace at which it is delivered is too slow. At first, I didn't mind having to press A to make dialogue progress, but after my 15th 5-minute long conversation, of which I ended up having way more by the end, I was ready to start holding the menu button and skipping things. The main issue with that, of course, is that the quest log routinely does a terrible job of explaining where to go for objectives, so I didn't want to risk it. This game mostly takes place around one town, and you will run back and forth talking to its inhabitants hundreds of times throughout your playthrough. Eventually my brain would kind of turn off and I would barely register what anyone was saying because I knew what the end would be, which is, CJ, please go here, find this, and bring it back to me. At the start, you have a small amount of stamps to fill out on your card. After I filled out the card, I thought I must be getting close to the end, but then I saw the full list, and it wasn't the 20 or so fetch quests I had done. No. It was 160. There are legitimately fun things to do in this game, but my god, why did you have to make me repeat the same thing so many times? I must have been through the Great Forest area for 50 different quests now, and they're all unlocked in a set path. So it's not easy to be able to find items in there before the quest exists every time. The main reason being your limited resource pack, which can initially hold 50 items per dungeon run. All missions in combat take place in dungeons with a rather similar setup. They have signposts at which you can save, and if you die 20 minutes into a run and haven't found another signpost, you lose all your progress and you have to reload from that last save. Now the game does have autosaves, but they seem to mostly kick in for story-related events. The game isn't too difficult, but the few times I did die 15 or 35 minutes into a run and saw I had no autosaves, it was extremely painful. If you do successfully complete or leave a dungeon, everything you picked up will go into your infinitely large main inventory. One of the biggest issues with the game is that picking up of items, so they included this cute little animation for these little glowing balls of light to jump up from defeated enemies or broken objects, and they do a beautiful arc and then land on the ground. It takes a second or two, and if you don't stand around and wait for that animation to finish, and you're not close enough, you just don't get the item. It is infuriating, as you are on fetch quest number 85 and have to stop or run back to get icy batwing or copper ores numbers 20 into your freaking pouch. Sorry, I said I was going to be more positive, and let me hit something I really did like, and that's that CJ, Guru, and Isha all have an upgradable weapon, set of armor, and 2 ring slots. Eventually, each will have a few more slots that let you set an elemental attunement for your damage dealt and damage received. And it was a fun system that worked well, and alongside the writing was a real highlight for me. To gain this gear, there are tons of items in the world to collect, and you'll be forced to upgrade those multiple shops through truly boring side quests so you can use them. Every good part of this game kept me going, but it was a struggle. There's no leveling tree either, but you do have a character level that goes through a standard experience system. The money in the game is called bakwa, and it is mainly found through quest rewards. There were no dialogue choices, that I saw at least, and in fact the only real choice I made was naming each of my character's weapons through a fun preset naming system. You're along for the ride story-wise, and you have no real control over how everything goes, but this being a prequel, it always felt like it had that distinct story to tell, and I was fine with it, because the story's pretty damn good, and occasionally worth the awkward, never-ending, fades to black whenever a dialogue section ends, that is then followed up by a quest complete screen, which has you press A to get through any rewards, and my god, it can take like 30 seconds or more to finally be able to move again when someone is done talking! The music was well done, and I never found it annoying despite hearing it for many hours. Sound effects are what one would expect, and there was no voice acting to be heard. Bug-wise, I had a maddening issue where the game would constantly tell me it couldn't sync my save file to the cloud, pretended it worked with quick resume when it didn't, and in fact it didn't even work with suspend mode, and it was in this weird limbo state Xbox Club-wise where it would show me as playing, but achievement and stats were hidden. In short, it's been a bit of a mess in a bunch of small ways pre-launch, and I'm really hoping that they iron them out in time before the game goes public. It's, in conclusion, a really good 10-hour game that was stretched to be nearly 3 times as long. I mean, if you find yourself loving it early on, then it might just hold up for you. Sadly, I was done by then and had to force myself to go any further despite really loving the story, writing, and characters. Even the gameplay eventually became something close to good, and it's really pretty. For either $14.99 or a download on Xbox Game Pass, it's not the worst way to spend your time and money. But I just can't help feeling like the developers at Rabbit & Bear Studios bit off a little more than this game was able to chew. Thank you so much for watching. If you can like, comment, and subscribe, it really helps that darned YouTube algorithm. And you can visit us at patreon.com/XboxEra if you really want to help. And we'll see you next time.